how do I make my slides? How do I make my presentation visually appealing? There are several things you ought to consider. So we'll quickly run through those things step by step. If at some point you need clarity on any of them, feel free to pause me and ask questions. So the first one is for your slide or your presentation to be visually appealing, you should make it clear and concise. Clear and concise means you should not have too much text. Okay. Preferably, instead of having a lot of text, you can make your points, you can make it in bullet points. It makes it easy for someone to look at and understand. If you can see what is being displayed here, I've said the same thing in two different ways. You see, the first one has to do with it being in paragraph, and the second one has to do with it being in bullet form. So if you look at it too, you can quickly denote that the second part is easy to understand. Just by looking at it, I know that you are trying to tell me to limit text to only essential points, use bullet points or short phrases, avoid overcrowding slides with too much information. But the other one, I need to read through for the first part to understand what exactly you want me to do. So for your slides to be visually appealing, first thing you should note is that as much as possible, reduce the content, make it concise, make it understandable. There are a lot of things that you have to say. You can just reduce it into a phrase or a sentence for the person to understand. Preferably put them in a bullet point, just like we have here. So you see that we have a lot of things that has to be said, but it's being presented here in form of a bullet point. So this makes it easy for your audience to understand, easy for them to grab. So instead of saying to make your slide look great, always limit text to essential points by using bullet points or short phrases where necessary. Also avoid overcrowding slides with too much information so that the reader can easily process the information being presented. The slide must be clear and concise as possible. So instead of me writing all these things up, I can simply put it that you should limit your text to essential points, use bullet points or phrases, and then avoid overcrowding slides. So you can testify that the second one is clear and straight to the point without too much talk. The person really understands the point you are trying to make and is easy to grab. So that's the first thing you should note while coming up with a presentation. In as much as you have a lot of things you wish to talk about, ensure that you limit it as much as possible to a few points that capture everything that has to be captured. And the issue here might be that there are a lot of things we want to say, but we don't know how to make it concise. That's where today almost everything has been made easy. We have a lot of AI tools you can use. You can even use ChatGPT, put the entire text there and ask it to break it down for you in bullet points and make it clear and concise. It will do it. It will just give you the whole point you are trying to make. It will give it to you in bullet points and make it clear and concise. So this is one thing you should note whenever you are coming up with a presentation. You remove the too much words, excess words, and make it clear. So the second one you should know is to have a consistent design. Have a consistent design. I don't know if you've noticed that I've shown you two slides now. There's the first slide, there's the second slide. Okay. One thing about this slide is that there is uniformity between the two slides. It shows, excuse me, I'm still talking about the same thing. It's still the same presentation. So there should be consistency. Not when the first one is coming up with a different kind of design or color presentation, then the second one is now having something totally different. There should be something consistent about them to let the person know that, okay, this is still the same document. In as much as it can appear in various forms, you can use things to make it look nice. But let there be consistency. Let there be consistency in terms of text, in terms of color, in terms of style. So here I've done something here. If you've noticed, for the first part of it, you see we have used a cohesive color scheme throughout the presentation, maintain consistency in font styles and sizes, ensure uniformity in alignment and spacing. So I've repeated the same thing again, but I'm trying to lay emphasis that the first one now does not follow the pattern. The first sentence I made here does not follow consistency, both in font size, in font styles, and even the alignment is not properly aligned. You have some bullets starting at the edge, another one starting somewhere else. So human beings by default, we can spot when something is off. Just by looking at this, you can tell that there is something off. Okay, another thing that you can point out from this is that the one in the box, in the yellow box, is just different. It's off. It doesn't rhyme with every other color that we have in this particular slide. Hello. So it doesn't really rhyme with what we have in this particular slide. It is yellow in color, and even the write-up on top of it is now white. So it shows it's a misalignment. You can easily capture that just by looking at it. So try as much as you can to follow the same color scheme in a presentation. Ensure that you maintain the same font. For those that do designs for flyers and the rest, most times you can use different kinds of fonts just to make it stand out. But if you are doing a presentation, from experience, I will tell you to maintain a particular font throughout that presentation. Yes, it can come in different sizes, it can come in different styles. It might be italics, it might be bold, it might be bigger than the rest, but ensure that everything you have on that presentation maintains the same font. Don't use Times New Roman in one font and the next one you're using Calibri, or the next one you're using Century. Maintain the same font, maintain the same color scheme, make it consistent. It makes your presentation to stand out. That's the second thing you should know. Have a consistent design. One other thing you should know is ensure you have an engaging visual. It's called a presentation for a reason, because they want to see, not just to hear. So if you're talking about something, ensure you have a visual. You have a visual that really shows what you are talking about. If I'm describing about talking about Messi, I can't just be giving you only text about Messi. No, there ought to be an image that tallies with exactly what I'm showing in that particular slide. So make use of images, make use of graphics, make use of icons, especially to talk about what you want to say. Okay, later on I will tell you where you can get icons and quality images for presentations. So this is very essential to make your presentation engaging. Ensure that there is an image attached to most things that require images. Graphics, whenever you're talking about hierarchy or a flow chart or a process or a step, okay, ensure that you are using a graphical representation to show those processes, so that just by looking at it, I can tell that after this stage, this is the next stage, and this is the next one. I don't need to read through to know that this is a step, or this is a process. So whenever you have a process to show, whenever you have a hierarchy to show, or a process flow, ensure that you use a graphical representation. It's much more easier and it makes it catchy for the person that is looking at it. Then use icons. Icons can be used to represent a list of things. Maybe I'm listing out things I need to buy. I don't need it to really read through to understand what I want to buy, okay, or what I'm highlighting. Maybe a list of equipment for a particular thing that I wish to present. I can use an icon such that you look at it and you see straightforward that this is what this refers to. Okay, so if you look at the icon that we have here, it has a lot to do with either a restaurant or a server or a waitress or something. So just use an icon. Incorporate these relevant images, graphics, and icon. Use charts to illustrate data and statistics effectively. It saves you a lot. Instead of using tables, instead of using a lot of things that will occupy space, you can just use a graphic design to show that this is a projection, this is a hierarchy, and it's easier to understand. Then the next one I want to lay emphasis on is on white space. White space. I know these days, when you hear a slide and a presentation, most people would just like to make it so colorful, put a lot of things there so that it will look nice. From experience, from professional experience, I will let you know that if you really want to do a slide and you want to make it stand out, especially the one that you have to present to people, relevant stakeholders or any other individual, try to utilize what we know as white space. White space means ensure that there is this white background or white demarcation between elements. Okay, let there be a balance for clarity. It shows you that distinguishing elements, that this is different from this. Okay, so I have this here. In as much as this looks beautiful and it looks okay, but just a look at it, you know that there's something off. You can't really distinguish that, okay, this write-up is being placed on something. I can choose to redesign this and change this rectangle that the write-ups are on to white. Once I change it to white, it will make it visually appealing. It will make it different. It will give it a very different look. So instead of bombarding your presentation with a lot of pictures, a lot of icons, a lot of images, because you want it to stand out, you want it to be amazing, you want it to be so much colorful, my advice is to utilize what we call a white space. Ensure that there is this white element. I for one prefer a presentation that has a white background. It allows you to play with a lot of colors, a lot of images, a lot of things without having a contradicting feel. Okay, because once you have changed the background to, let's say, blue, it limits you to the things that you can put there. It brings a limit. You can't start putting up a red icon or a yellow background or something on top of that blue background. So for it to be visually appealing and for it to give you that space to do a lot of things, it's best to have that white space, have that white background, and it will enable you to do a lot of things on your slide. So the next one is balance and alignment. Balance and alignment. Like I mentioned before, there's this thing about humans. We like things that are aligned. If you come into a place and you see something that is off, even without being told that it's off, you can tell. Okay, just by looking at this now, I have a lot of items that I've shown here, item 1 to item 6, and it's just scattered. It's not properly arranged. Okay, so this can be a turn off for someone. It can be a red flag for someone that you are presenting it to. He or she cannot just make sense of what you are saying just because the presentation does not look well arranged. Okay, so for most persons that are just joining, I've talked about making sure that you have a clear and concise content. This simply means that instead of writing a lot of text, you can put it in a bullet form. You can summarize it and use phrases. Okay, you don't need to write too much. And I mentioned that instead of you trying to crack your head on how to make it small, you have AI tools that can do that for you. You can use ChatGPT, input your content there, and ask it to make it concise and clear. It will reduce that workload for you. People don't want, it's a presentation for a reason. It's not a big document, so people don't want you to do a lot. They just want you to do little. Then I've talked about having a consistent design. Okay, let there be a flow in your design. Don't just have a different, the first slide be totally different from the second one. No, it's the same presentation. So there should be something that can tell me that this is still the same presentation. Okay, from the first one to the second one, there's consistency. Then I talked about engaging visuals. Okay, use images, use graphics, use icons to make sure that what you are doing is engaging. Okay, don't just describe something with text alone. Add an image that can describe that. You know, there's a saying that an image is 1,000 words. So most times, instead of writing, so this is how he did this, did that, you can just put an image that summarizes the whole thing. Okay, the image will carry 1,000 words. It will occupy the space that a lot of words, a lot of text was supposed to occupy. The same with graphics and icons. Graphics is very essential, especially when you are showing process flows, when you are showing hierarchy. So it eliminates you having so much text, and it makes it easy for the person looking at it to understand. Then I've talked about white space, and then balance and alignment. So the good thing about balance and alignment is that PowerPoint itself have given us a lot of tools to ensure that whatever we are doing is properly aligned. Okay, it has some alignment command tabs that we can use to ensure that whatever we are doing is aligned. They are in the same height, they are in the same depth, they are in the same size. So these are things that we'll go through later on and understand how best to use them. So the next one is typography. I've mentioned it before. I know a lot of us, even in our phones, we change our font. We are trying to make it look unique and stand out, but please note that presentation is not for you. Okay, you are not doing the presentation for yourself. The presentation is for someone to understand what you are trying to present. Okay, in as much as it's looking neat and fine, or you are in love with that particular type of font because it looks cool, if the person you are sending it to or you are presenting it to does not understand it, does not like it, or is finding it difficult to read, it has defeated the entire purpose of that presentation. So to be on a safe side, you can just use, if it's a presentation, you can just use one of the commonly accepted fonts. You can use just Times New Roman, Calibri, or Century, something that is universally understandable. Okay, you don't need to start trying to show off your skills. The purpose is to pass information in a clear manner. So if you want your slide or your presentation to be nice and appealing, please try to use a font that can easily be read or understood. I know most of us might look at this and conclude, okay, let's say the second one now, the second font that we have here looks nice, but believe me that most persons will still find it difficult to read through. Why? Because of the spacing. Most people might not so much find it that nice. It's good, quite alright, I agree, and it looks fine, but I'll still go for the last one, number 6. If I'm the one doing the presentation, I might just go for the last one. Out of all these ones highlighted here, 1 to 6, I'll simply go for 6 because anybody can easily read this. Anybody can just look at it and understand, okay, this is what this particular sentence is saying. So it's not so much difficult to assimilate. So your typography is very important. Avoid too many fonts in one presentation. And I've said it, for me, I recommend using just one font, but different forms. You can use it in italics, you can use it in bold format, you can use it in various ways to lay emphasis, but changing from one font to another just because you can is not good for a nice presentation. And then we have hierarchy. Okay, you can as well use fonts to show hierarchy. Use font styles to show hierarchy. And I'm showing you an example. There are ways that you can show hierarchy, either by changing the style or by changing the color. Guys, I'm referring to hierarchy in terms of text now. Okay, most times you might have a heading, you might have a subheading, you might have another one under it. So in this, we can use either the size, the style, or color. Okay, so for the first one, we have about the project, and then we have members. We want to talk about the members of that project. Here I'm using size to show the difference. You see that the size here is big. About the project, the size is big. Then when I come to the subheading, which is members, the members now is smaller than the first one. Okay, just by looking at this, I can tell that this is the main heading and this is the second one. Why for the next one? Okay, and then I want to lay emphasis that we have a 5-man membership and we are present across 33 states, 36 states rather. So my emphasis now is on the states and my emphasis is also on the number of members that we have. So what do I do? For the first part, I used style. I made it bold to lay emphasis on the 5 men. Okay, and then I'm using 36 states. I also made it bold as a means of laying emphasis on that 36 states. So for here, I'm using bold as a means of emphasis, and then I'm also increasing the size of the text to show hierarchy. Why for the second one we have the same size, but now I'm using color to show hierarchy, then I'm using italics to show emphasis. So I have for the 36 text now is now in italics form, which is to lay emphasis on it. Why for the members I'm using a different color to show you that this is under something else. Okay, so it's very important that just by looking at the slide I can tell that this is under this. I don't need you to start explaining to me that, okay, this is okay, let me just say this now. Okay, a presentation should be able to present itself without you doing the presentation. What do I mean? So if I send this to someone should be able to interpret exactly what the presentation is all about without the presence of the person that did it. Okay, so you should ensure that the hierarchy can explain itself without having to mention it to the person looking at it, that this is actually showing hierarchy. I don't know if you understand me. Hope you are still following.
Yes, sir, we are.
All right, good to know.
Yes, sir, we're following you, sir.
Okay, so a presentation, your slide should be able to present itself or explain itself even in your absence. Okay, if someone cannot interpret what you've presented because you are not there, then there's an issue. Okay, unless if it's a business proposal or something that you need to really talk about, but to an extent, just by looking at the slide, even if the person does not completely understand what you are presenting, he or she should also understand certain elements, that this is under this or this is on this. Okay, or this is an emphasis that you are trying to lay just by looking at it. Then the last one I wish to talk about is transition and animations. Transitions and animations. Yes, I know that most persons, once they dive into PowerPoint, they love the presentation, they love the animation. You want your slides to fold in, come out, turn, and do a whole lot of things. But my own personal opinion is, if you're not good at animations or transitions and you are very sure that you're not really that an expert, avoid it. As much as you can, avoid it. Okay? Because it can defeat the entire purpose of your presentation. Most times it can take time, it can be off, you might just be using the wrong thing at the wrong place, because most transitions or animations is for emphasis. Okay, transition is different. Animations are for emphasis. Okay, so if it's something you can't use, it's best to just avoid it. I try as much as I can to avoid using transitions and animations in my presentation. Then when in doubt, avoid it. When in doubt, you can just avoid it. But it's always good to incorporate animations, not too much, just a little, to lay emphasis or to draw someone's attention to certain things that you want the person to see. Okay, so I'll also avoid, when you're using it, avoid distracting or overly flashy animations. Avoid the one that is just so obvious that it can take away, it can take the attention off from what you're actually presenting. Okay, many persons might now be admiring the transition or the animation and forget to capture the main information in the slide. You understand that the purpose of your presentation is to pass an information. Okay, if after all the information is not properly passed, then there's an issue with the presentation. So make your presentation as clear and concise as possible by limiting the amount of words that you are putting in. Have a consistent design. Make sure you have an engaging visuals. You can use icons, use images, use charts to explain a lot of things. Use white space so that you can have enough room to do things that you wish to do on your slide. Okay, balance and alignment is very important. Typography is highly important. And then visual hierarchy. Ensure that just by looking at it, one can tell that this is a heading, this is a subheading, okay, and this is the body. Let there be a distinguishing factor among all this. And then transition and animation. So my key final notes is this: always remember that the sole purpose of the presentation is to pass information as clear and concise as possible. You might be tempted to show your design skills or to let people know that yes, you've arrived with your transitions, but the emphasis is to pass information. So if the information is not passed, then there is no need. The entire presentation has been defeated. So you should always have that in the back of your head, whether your presentation have actually passed information you wish to pass, okay, or is it just full of text without any information being passed. So ensure that the key information are captured in your presentation. A picture, icon, or graph can represent 1,000 words, so it's advisable to use them wisely.